welcome everyone to the CMO panel discussion, and we're hosted by QKS Group. I'm Aaron Andrews. I'm Associate Director for QKS, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. And I'm joined by Anya D'Souza, who's the fractional CMO and a strategic marketing consultant, and Datesh Rayo, who's a fractional CMO and a branding advisor. Both have many years experience in the marketing ecosystem, and it would be great to have their discussion with them today. And in our discussion, we'll be focusing on the evolution of the CMO role, specifically from proving ROI to truly driving measurable business growth. So historically, marketing has been evaluated on this notion of campaign performance and efficiency. Yes, campaigns are still an active part of marketing and still as a task to do, but today, what I see is that that expectation is really expanding. CMOs are now being asked to influence revenue, customer lifetime value, broader business outcomes. And this shift is forcing many to rethink the marketing stack. And from a set of tools that support campaigns to a more integrated system that enables the end-to-end customer journeys, real-time decisioning, and scalable personalization. And additionally, we'll be exploring what's changing now and what comes next. We all know the modern marketing stack is being reshaped, of course, by AI, first-party data strategies, and this rising expectation around customer experience. But I also know many organizations are still working to close that gap between ambition and execution. So I'm hoping we can unpack not just what the future looks like, but actually what's working in practice and where things are breaking down a bit and those issues that come up and how each of you is navigating this transition from that experimentation to this reality, this real transformation. So with all of that in mind, I'd like to start here with this notion of customer experience as the growth engine and this this shift from traditional campaigns to customer journeys that we're hearing a lot about, and when we're talking about marketing and marketing technology. So Anya, when it comes to marketing stack, how do you believe that it has evolved from campaign-centric to truly journey-centric? And were there any challenges or issues that you've seen as people are looking to implement that strategy?
Sure. That's a great question. And I think if I were to take a step back, I work with various organizations in the manufacturing and the technology space as well. And I believe contemplating a move from a campaign perspective to a journey-based approach really depends hugely on your customer behavior and on your customer economics to start with. And your customer economics are defined by the kind of life cycle of your buying journey, the kind of decision depth, the kind of lifetime value of your customers. So several organizations, or maybe just in the tech and manufacturing sector, need to think it through very clearly before they make a jump from campaign to journey-based approach to start with. So that's one. But if indeed an organization was to do it, I think some of the challenges an organization would face would be threefold or fourfold. Number one is that you're moving from fragmented tools, like you're looking at ad platforms, you're looking at automation platforms, etc., which are pretty disparate, and you're basically looking at an integrated system at the core of which is a CRM. And it could sound like table stakes, but it's probably not for many organizations. Your CRM is probably not exactly where you want it to be. Mm-hmm. And therefore ensuring that your CRM is super optimized, you have like the right automation layers in place is probably the first challenge that an organization has to circumvent if they're going to make this evolution. The second is really about the kind of customer data that you have here. The super hygiene, again, it sounds like table stakes, but probably is not. You need the right kind of customer data. You need it segmented. You need it wired down. The larger the database, the more complex this issue is. So that's probably the challenge too that I've seen. The third would really be a kind of mindset shift, and this could be region specific across the world. But I think the mindset of an organization and the team really needs to shift from, when you're running a campaign specific approach, you can expect the inquiries to start kicking in probably as soon as the campaign's out the door. That's not going to happen when you have a journey-based approach. You've got to be a whole lot more patient. You've got to think long term. You need to have a vision. You need to have the appetite to invest over the long term to be able to look at buying cycles that are a whole lot longer. You're basically looking at measurement systems which are not inquiries, ROAS or CAC. You're looking at customer lifetime value, for example, which is a much more long-run metric. So in a nutshell, I'd say I've outlined some of the challenges that an organization should be aware of before they make a change or a shift. And I think probably the right midway to do it is to look at a couple of segments where you feel a journey-based nurturing approach is really something you want to pilot and try, layer that over the current campaign system that you have, and basically build it into your CRM to ensure that you're optimized and you're scaling slowly but efficiently.
Yeah, that's great information that you provide, and I really liked how you touch on that the topic of data underneath that. I think that's been a struggle for decades now, if we can say that, with our business applications that we've all been using, and that notion of having clean data, quality data to use with that those journeys that you're putting in place. Yes, data is a challenge, and then Datesh, when we're looking at these shift from the campaign to this journey focus, everyone talks about personalization, and of course, the data is a key factor in that personalization, getting to know that customer, basically to share with them or provide to them what they're looking for at the right time on the right device and so forth. But that's great to have an idea of and to put it out on paper somewhere and document this is what we want to do. But what actually scales in practice in without destroying those margins and operations? You got to keep the company moving, got to keep those processes moving. So how can you actually scale in practice without destroying those margins or the operational efficiency there?
I think that's a great question, and it's a question that has been pertinent across the organizations for a long time now. It's the most overpromised and underdelivered topic in entire marketing technology. But what I see is there's something called the personalization paradox. What it means actually is truly personalize something that is more expensive, more costly to produce and maintain. At the same time, the more it scales, the less personalization it becomes. It becomes so big that there is no personalization anywhere. So it becomes mass. So this kind of paradox is what the organizations are facing, and they are all caught between one-to-one personalization, where it's very powerful and also very difficult to execute. At the same time, mass marketing, which is seen as the most scalable one, but it's very, very ineffective. But what we need to understand is the fact that, which is not what personalization, how do we personalize everything? It is what part of the journey that is worth personalization is what we need to understand and then go after it. I think it's very important for what part of it, because what can't scale when it comes to these kind of personalizations is, let's say, custom content for every segment. Let's say that. It can't be a thing, because you cannot segment everybody and have the same content or different contents to each of the segments, because it's not only kills it not only delays the campaign, but it also kills the campaign velocity, and the fact that it becomes inconsistent quality of work that comes into the body of work. The second part is we cannot have personalization across all channels, an email, a banner, a social media, everything. If that is to be done, imagine the infrastructure that an organization has to have to do those things. And having personalization without content operating model, what we call the content operating model, because you have content flowing in without brand guardrails, and as well as approval workflows. What happens if you don't have this? You will have a lot of content coming in, which is not worth, and it doesn't align with any of those audiences you want to reach out to. But what actually scales out in the other ways to see modular content architecture. What we need to be doing is that we need to build at least 10 to 20 reusable blocks of content. Now, what happens is then personalize one or two aspects of those, like say a headline or a visual or a call to action going there. Keep the rest consistent, and I think you can turn around this, and it fairly personalizes to that thing, and you understood already the audience which you have. And second important thing is that personalization or the decision layer that is there in that. Now, what happens is, let's have a decision layer, not a content layer, because content layer, as I told earlier, that there is going to be inconsistent content that is coming there. But if you have a layer of AI on the content layer, where it takes the decision of what to serve to each one of them, defining the audience, and that goes in a long way to create those kind of things, And the second most important thing is that if you define the audience and therefore you have a technology or the AI layer on it where it becomes smarter to pick up the signals and think, what kind of content should I be doing that? And that's where it becomes more personalized than whatever the layer is there. Now, it's not about having personalization, but every organization should look at 3 or 4 aspects of what the content personalization should be done. One, what decision of personalization will change the consumer? Okay, will it have an impact on the consumer? How much does it cost to have this personalization done? Whether it's worth it. And the third and the last important aspect is that, can we maintain with this kind of budgets, with kind of things, with kind of the infrastructure we have, in the kind of resources we have, can we maintain a consistent visibility on scale? That's what I think is, in a nutshell, what I would say.
Well, you bring up some great points as far as the scalability, because there's the two aspects of the impact on the consumer, and then what you're doing internally, and are those things working? So things internally that you're putting in place, the operational aspects, delivering it through those personalized customer journey, is it really impacting the consumer to drive them to a decision to, with many companies, buy something, buy a service, buy a product, etc. And then that whole operational aspect, it really leads to, so Anya, it really leads to this notion of who really owns the customer experience today. Is that marketing or product teams or operations teams? And how does that impact, your stack decisions? Which marketing technologies do you use, or how do they operate? So really, who owns that customer experience, if anyone?
Yeah. I think it's an area that a lot of organizations are probably still figuring out. But for me, the customer experience is, first of all, the customer experience is basically a reflection of your brand and is basically tied closely in with it. So that's one. The second is customer journeys about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even pre-COVID or pre-pandemic, were linear. They're not linear anymore. They could be circular, they could be sporadic. You can't really predict where your customer is going to form an opinion about your brand or where he's going to make a purchase decision in today's world. And you've got several functions, which marketing is one of them, products the other, you've got operations, you've got sales, you've got service, which are basically touch points with your customer at various stages in a non-linear buying journey, which makes it all the more difficult than it was. And hence, to your first question, who owns it? Well, I guess in some organizations, it's the CMO. It could be the COO. It could be a growth head. It could be the customer experience lead if they are actually at scale and they're investing in it. But I believe an organization that's really looking at evolving is focusing on these functions coming together around a certain outcome, which is customer experience, instead of looking at siloed functions that operate on various tech stacks and therefore you don't have a holistic view of how your entire CX outcomes are really panning out. I believe so. Point one, from a technology stack, it's about integrating your service module, your CRM, your marketing platforms, your product development platforms, because you're pulling in voice of customer, you're pulling in customer insights, you're pulling in surveys that you're doing with your customer, etc., which are really going to feed into your NPI channel, really, in terms of new product development. You're looking at whether your service teams today really have an opportunity to upsell certain products to the customers that you're talking to, in terms of growing revenues. You're looking at insights coming in to be able to plan your marketing campaigns better, etc. So you're basically looking at more a customer stack and not so much a siloed functional stack. That's one. I think the other is the kind of metrics that you're looking at evaluating. Is it retention rate of customers? Is it the lifetime value of customers? Is it an NPS in terms of a net promoter score, etc., which basically shows how well you're doing in terms of your customer acquisition, your customer retention, and your revenue growth. I think that about captures it really in terms of how CX is really panning out.
Right, and that makes it even more imperative for organizations to have a centralized way that they communicate, and those teams that you outlined work together. And many times I've mentioned this notion of having some sort of what I've called a center of excellence. It's really just representatives from different parts of the organization being able to communicate around a central theme. In this case, are how are we impacting our customers and the consumers of our products and services through either marketing and products and operations and service. So having that centralized notion is key to that. But in the mix of all this, I touched on the topic of AI. You both have touched on the topic of AI and some of your prior inputs here, and we've seen this massive impact of AI. It went from this notion of being this big hype. It was the shiny new toy, and everybody was curious. So what is it? What can we do? And then they really started putting AI to the test. Okay, what are some real outcomes that we can use and apply using these AI tools? And can we really benefit from it in any way? So like I said, we went from this shift of the shiny new toy to really they want a real trustworthy output that drives results is what they're looking for. And so, Datesh, as you're working with these various teams and companies that that you advise and people that you speak with, where do you see things moving from the sense of AI experiments to trying to test it out a little bit to see can we really do anything with it, and we may not. We really like using the tools that we have because they're reliable. We know how the outcomes are going to be. So moving from this notion of AI experiments to AI reality in the marketing stack, where do you see things moving in those two different areas?
I think AI has been in conversations for the last 2 years now. Every workshop you attend, every webinar you attend, every panel discussions you are actually listening to, it's all about AI, and how does it impact marketing? How does it And most of the organizations, if you look at it, the kind of percentage of organizations which have adopted into AI into their day-to-day things are far less than who are currently doing it. I think after 2 years, there are some companies which have yet to get onto that, but yet their start has begun. But the gap between the organizations which have gone into AI at least 1.5 years ago, and as an experiment to what it is today, the gap is still where the organizations are stuck. But what's happening here is most of the organizations have gone implementation with AI wide, not deep. So they have not yet just got the real things that has been expected out of it, or they don't know how to go about it, or they didn't know how to scale it up. From that point of view, if you look at it, there are some good things that have happened with AI, and people, very matured organizations, have used it to the maximum things. But at the same time, what has happened here is the people who are seeing this AI as merely as initiatives, not as outcomes. So what they've started off with saying that, okay, let's do this AI and see what happens. And then what is that coming in? They've accepted whatever that was coming to them, not the way they have defined the outcomes, because they have not defined it, because they wanted to see how efficient this was things. But that said, what's happening in reality is with the mature organizations, from whatever I have worked and seen with IBM and other organizations, is some of the factors that have been impacted very, very fantastically. One is the audience intelligence, the way we know our customers. It's not about segments anymore. It's about the signals that are coming to. And a real-time behavioral analysis, what is giving us is dynamically telling us what is the consumer doing, where is he coming from, what is he doing, what is he watching, and which channel is it performing better. So you're getting kind of signals from each of this. That is one part of things that is coming out very real with an AI. And what's happening with the content and everyone, the first thing that went into AI was content development, and ChatGPTs and any other models have been fantastic in terms of content generations. It is moving from content generations to governance. Now, we know a lot of applications are developing good content the way you define the content to that. But I think the organizations have moved to such an extent that the AI is embedded in the content supply chain. When that is happening, and with the effective use of governance tools between that, and you define what is required, I think you're getting a far better output than what you were expecting previously. I think that is one of the what is the content architecture model that is being defined today, and it's working fantastically for these mature organizations, and IBM is one of them. Attribution and measurement is that what's happening today is that with the AI layer coming onto the budgetary allocations, now AI is also defining which platform, which channel is performing very well for the brand, and therefore the allocations are also defined the way that they are. I think these are the real things that are happening, although there is still a lot of organizations which have moved from initiatives to real outcomes that have been defined, and applying AI to those aspects of it. I think that would be a great thing for AI to come. And although it is merely as a tool, but it's the way you use the tool. That's what I believe, because it's contrary to what the threats have been. I think we have the ability to think, and I also feel AI today is going to bring the best of the marketeers, because earlier marketeers were so involved in the execution point of view. But once the execution is taken away, you get back to your real job of thinking what the brand should go, where it should be doing, how we are to perform. And these things come to the fore. When these come to the fore, AI will be in the background telling you, doing what it's supposed to do, and at a scale that you can't even imagine. I think there's fantastic things happening with AI, and there's still lots to come.
That's correct, and you touched on a good topic there of governance. Many people think of when they think of the term governance, they think of it more in a security mindset. You know, we've got to have some governance around how certain tools operate, who has access to what can the tool do, that's still critically important in that realm. But you touched on a good point of governance around the usage of AI, its output, and how it operates within that content supply chain that you mentioned. And then this, I like this point you touched on as far as letting AI help with some of the execution of things, and it's that administrative type task that many of us have been struggling with for many years. And then as marketers, being able to take a step up to, like you mentioned, to see what's going on, how things are performing, and where should we shift, thinking more strategically, in other words, and this notion of being more creative. So those that have those creative talents, to let them shine. And then, so Anya, building upon what Datesh just shared, and what I've just alluded to, it's really important. What does the ideal human and AI collaboration model look like? We've heard that term "human in the loop" quite a bit when talking about AI. So
Yeah.
what does that look like, this AI and human collaboration, and what roles do you see changing fastest in that collaboration?
It's a great question, and I think I'm probably going to be unpopular for saying this, but I don't think any of the headlines talking about how many people have been laid off because of AI, that's happening a lot, is helping the human AI collaboration at all. Most employees today are apprehensive. They aren't approaching AI with the kind of open, embracive, collaborative mindset they should be, because they're scared and they don't know how things are going to pan out. So we probably got off to on the wrong foot on that one. But just coming back to your specific question, um, I think the ideal human AI collaboration model should focus not on replacement of humans by AI platforms, and that could be part of the narrative that's out in the press today, but it's really about a redistribution of how we look at activities and work. AI has definitely proven to be strong on execution, like the three of us have discussed, at scale, at speed. But you can't really replace the human focus that comes from a wealth of experience in the field, in the market with customers, human judgment, human creativity, and context, right? And when we're saying context, it's about knowing your market, it's about knowing your customers, it's about knowing how your customers receive your products. It's not all captured by any AI platform today. And it's experience that really helps humans take the right judgment calls on the kind of executional data or activity that AI is basically throwing out. So the right way to pose it is basically that AI handles execution at scale, strong on content, strong on data analysis, very strong on personalization, all of the inputs that Tesh just spoke about, strong on testing campaigns, throwing up insights, etc. But humans really own the directive piece there, right? They are clear about strategy. And I'm not talking about AI generated strategy. I'm talking about strategy that comes from understanding how the market receives what your company is offering is, where your blind spots are, what your customers really looking for, positioning, and final decision making. In terms of roles changing the fastest in marketing specifically, definitely content and creative roles. And this started up with the LLMs coming in, and then several curation, brand ideation tools that really help support marketers be a whole lot more creative, faster, better. Content, for example, is if marketers are able to scale way faster than they could earlier. The second is ops and analytics. So a lot of data research, a lot of market research, second level, a lot of data tooling, automation logic, insights coming in, etc. Definitely strong on that piece. And I guess the last part is really performance marketing, though I would like to put a caveat here. There are a whole lot of people who think that performance marketing can be outsourced completely to AI. But the key to really doing performance marketing the way it should be and seeing those outcomes in terms of generating the inquiries for sales or generating that pipeline really ensures that you know your products, you know your markets, and you have a really strong industry understanding. So yes, AI can help with some amount of budget orchestration, customer insights, etc. But the final calls are needed to be taken by human beings for sure, with a lot of experience.
Yeah, and I like how you touch on that performance word there, and the performance aspect, because, and this is something I was going to ask you, Datesh, is thinking about the performance, then how do you balance that short-term efficiency gains, such as performance and inside of marketing, efficiency gains from AI with those longer-term transformations that many teams and organizations are looking for. How do you balance those two?
This is a very difficult and most pertinent questions the marketeers are facing today, the CMOs and the marketing leaders, because it's a huge tension for each of these guys when they see the implementation of AI into this. But what happens is the efficiency increases. Now, when the efficiency increases, the CFO comes into the picture and says, "You've saved so much money." When you saved so much money, so in a way, AI is positioned as an efficient player where cost saving happens. Now, where does the cost savings go into? Will you lead into transformation or not? Would you use that budget for transformation or not? The problem is the moment you use for one quarter, the CFO sees the savings for the next quarter and see what happens. This is one of the key things in the short-term games, that they don't see the long-term goals. So they see this as an immediate thing that is coming to us. Oh my goodness, you got these things, so we can eliminate this person, we can eliminate this person, so we got so much of savings. So what do I do that? Should we do I reinvest those kind of monies into data infrastructure, better data, better training, better something that will transform the entire way and be ready for being very competitive in the marketplace with far more better talent? That doesn't happen in each of this. But what we need to do is there should be a sincere attempt by the organizations as well as the people on the budget conversations, where whatever savings that comes should be reinvested into making this thing as a long-term transformation. Because short-term goals and savings are great. There is absolutely no argument about it. But can I get that money to reinvest in such a way that we get into the real transformation and get real results out of it? That's the no-brainer. People should look at it. But having said that, they are limited to only certain mature organizations. Once again, I say that because they've seen the value that comes out of it. Once you get the consumer comes out of it, it forms a motor of it, because that's very important for us. But for you, adding to your second question about how do we balance this, is to have a what do you call the sequence of short-term gains and a long-term transformation have to go hand in hand. So they have to be deliberately sequenced in such a way whatever happens here should also happen here. So there is a continuous process. And I'm sure each one of the CFOs or each one of the CTOs or the CMOs have an exploratory budget allocated it is insulated from the rest of the things. So that should be kept aside and nobody should know about it. And we should have those monies invested at the right time to see how it can impact the transformation. And third is to develop metrics, that is the board's metrics, when we actually present to the board. Let's say the CMO wants to present how it is going to change the brand or the organization with the kind of investments or the transformation that can happen, because he needs to understand the metrics the board would listen to. So that's very important to come to do. And what happens is the last and the final thing is a framework needs to be developed where we can say how efficiency build can save costs, how the saved cost can lead to transformation. So if a framework is built around these things, and I think the organization is approaching a well-balanced approach to the entire AI gains in short-term as well as long-term transformation.
And something you touched on, and I touched on, I think we've all touched on throughout our conversation today, is this notion of data feeding into AI. We all know that AI output is based on data, and we seem to be drowning in data. And yet the pace of decision making doesn't seem to match up. So you alluded to this, Datesh, about having that data to present so people can make decisions around how they operate, what to do with this short-term, long-term efficiency gains and the transformation. Those are key, important decision points to make. But yet the pace of decision making doesn't always seem to match up with these volumes of data that seemingly are easily available, but it's really turning that data into something that you can make a decision on. And so, Anya, knowing all of this, why are decisions still seemingly slow or unclear? Is it the challenge of turning that data into some sort of action, or is maybe AI's kind of muddying the waters a bit here? I don't know, but what are your thoughts around this challenge with this data into action?
I think both of you have captured the kind of insights and the volume of insights that AI throws up really accurately. But you're right. I mean, while AI has accelerated insights, data, you've got dashboards, you've got multiple variations of data. You've got multiple variations of the same decision. It hasn't all things. Ownership decision really comes from human experience, human judgment, and gut instinct basis your experience in the sector, industry, company you work with, right? So you're getting faster inputs without doubt, but you're not, decisions aren't faster. And that's happening for a variety of reasons, right? More data and faster analysis does not mean that decisions are going to come quicker. A lot of companies feel that AI can do all of the decision making in addition to the execution, which puts senior level people on the back foot today across industries. There's a certain amount of fear of going against the AI recommendation and making a wrong decision, because that decision is going to escalate pretty quickly. And there's a saying, right, that there's often paralysis that sets in when you have over analysis from data, and that's precisely what's usually happening. But I think two dimensions that I'd like to touch on. One is organizations to be able to be super efficient, and as we said earlier, AI can generate the insights on the data, and that's great. But in terms of decision making, ensure that the recommendations and the final decisions are made by people who have the experience, so by human beings who really have the experience to be able to make those decisions. That's one. And just because you probably need a decision system architecture in an organization to be able to deal with the kind of data analysis that's coming in across levels, you probably want to predefine decision rights to give people empowerment to make decisions irrespective of what the AI is recommending across the organization. You also want to basically set action thresholds with them. So if we do this and this happens, then what do we do? So that teams are aware of what's actually how the decision tree is going to pan out, and basically look at reversible, maybe bucket decisions from reversible decisions which are not with low business impact to irreversible decisions which are high business impact, and ensure that you're categorizing employees, what AI can really look at, maybe automating, and what you really need sound human judgment to do. Usually AI can perhaps come in on reversible, low impact business decisions, but you definitely want really strong human judgment on the irreversible, high business impact decisions. So that's my take on that.
And I like how you mentioned the human aspect of this, and I think that's important as a key takeaway of all this, to keeping people truly involved in this whole AI process. And staying on this topic of data here, Datash, is that with this shift to more reliance on first-party data and even zero-party data, as a big term that's coming up more and more, what's been harder than expected in truly building this notion of an actionable data foundation? What's really the tough thing about it for many organizations?
Yeah, this is one questions where the organizations are very honest in private and not very honest on stage. So what happens is, what do we do with the first party data? We announced the first party data strategy after all the things on data have come out. Very few of that has actually been activated. The people collect it but don't know what to do with this. So what we saw harder than expected is how clean is the data? Part one of it. Now, what's happening is they are collecting data over a period of time and not reviewing it on a time-to-time basis. They are not updating it. So if a data, even if it is first-party data, it needs to be updated on a regular basis. The strategy is not about collecting. It is not about data collection strategy. It is about data maintenance strategy too. So if you're collecting, you need to have a person or a team that looks at the data, maintaining it up to date and its all relevancy, because after 2 years, it becomes redundant. We don't know what's happened to that guy, what happens to these guys. So like as we speak, most of the organizations have data collection strategy, like I said, but they don't have a data maintenance strategy. Secondly, is that what is hard is identity resolution. What's happening is today a first-party data, a person is coming to your brand, your organization through multiple devices. through web, through a product, through a social media and all those things. How do we connect all this to a single data point, to a single person? Otherwise, what you end up doing is that you have seven, or let's say seven data points of the same person. Now, when you send a communication to it, it will go to the seven people.
Yeah.
You've not done anything to it. And you
Right.
at your receiving end, you'll see what kind of data it is there, and it's happening today. It's not a thing of the past, but it continues to happen. Whether it's a telecom guy or it's a bank guy, the same data is being repeated again and again and again. So it's time this organization looked at the data very seriously, number one. Number two, how do they maintain that to activate it and take actionable actions towards each of those data points for whatever organization wants to pursue them. It's a product, it's a service, or it's anything, it's a reminder medium or anything else. Now, zero-party data, as you said, they're willing to give their preferences, but what is the value exchange that happens to them? Am I going to get value in terms of my exchange? What are we actually giving to the consumer when he's willfully giving you the data that you want to, and he's taken the effort of giving you what his preferences are? Are you going to provide that? It's very, very important. Now, who owns the first party data is one more thing. Is it the CMO? Is the data analytic guy? Who owns it? And there should be one single organization which within the big organizations to take the ownership and see the entire refinement of the data that is there with them, whether it is first party data or a zero party data. It becomes their responsibility to ensure that the data is clean and tidy so that and is up to date. That will help, although it's an impossible task to have that, but I think there should be at least a way to go forward there. You know, what's happening today is that I receive at least 6 messages on an average from banks for the same thing, which I've repeatedly told them I'm not interested. That's where they should be striking it off, that it is not interested. Come back to me after 6 months. Probably I might be there, or leave me a number where I can call you when I need it. But what's happening is that is not happening. It's time for people to look at not only collecting first party data, it's the way they want to use it, the way they want to keep it clean, the way they want to use it for the future communications. It's very, very important. And that's where one of the key things the organization must concentrate on.
That goes back to that notion of governance we talked on. I think it should be split into 2 pillars if you were to think of this as governance, obviously from a security perspective, but governance from a quality of the data perspective.
Exactly.
And keeping it up to date. And that leads to this, as we're wrapping up here, this leads to my last question here with you, Anya. Obviously, reliance on decision-making on this data. It's important to have that clean data to make sure you can make correct decisions. But obviously, to make those decisions, you need information in a collected way. So it's typically, these dashboards or reports or some sort of metrics and KPIs that surface this in a logical way to make some sort of decision or see what's happening. So what metrics or KPIs do you care about today that maybe you didn't care about a few years ago, but maybe they've surfaced as really important today?
Yeah. I think the biggest, and this doesn't hold, there's probably different organizations are, because the to actual value creation for the organization and for the brand. Let's say about 5 years ago, CMOs were frothing at their mouth about CAC, ROIs, how many MQLs came in, etc. And those are good metrics to have, except that there are several shifts that have happened over the last few years, right? One is the rising customer acquisition cost, irrespective of what channel you're looking at. So while sales does their job, you're definitely looking at the channels to acquire customers today have really become more expensive, and hence you need to optimize more. A lot of saturation of performance channels. So you're looking at the cost of actual digital customer acquisition, net, going up almost every 6 months, etc. It's just becoming more competitive. The biddings got way higher and more expensive. You're also looking at the with customers having a whole lot of choice in the market, you're looking at them focusing on actual value from a product or an offering standpoint, which makes it which makes the focus on keeping your promotions, etc., more rooted in value add, more important. And lastly, you've got AI making the acquisition cost, the acquisition process much easier. Maybe not necessarily better, but definitely easier. And therefore, the metrics that have really changed, looking at what is the lifetime value of the customers that you have really acquired? How do you upsell, retarget, retain, resell to over a period of time? How do you ensure that you don't have customer attrition, etc.? That's one. The second is so that's NRR and net revenue retention in B2B, and you probably have a net repeat rate purchase in B2C, which really ensures that your acquisition costs are getting amortized over a period of time. And it's not just a one-off incident, really. You're also looking at the kind of customer quality that you're able to get in, not just the volume. Are you going to be able to perhaps sell a product at a higher margin to a customer that you brought in through an acquisition channel versus what would happen through an outbound on the field channel, etc., from sales? Are you acquiring customers who have expanding accounts, etc., across the world, and are you going to be able to really upsell to them and do this less to serve in terms of your overall life cycle? So I'd say a few. One is customer quality. The second is very clearly net revenue retention or repeat purchase, lifetime value. NPS would be another metric that's really important because a lot of organizations grow just due to promotions or word of mouth from customers that are happy with their products and offerings. And that's important. You could also throw in CSAT surveys. We spoke about CX earlier, but I think ensuring that you have a satisfaction survey that goes to your customer and analyzes whether you're really putting the metal where your mouth is over a period of time, and auditing whether your processes are as good as you intend for them to be is critical. But I think value is going to be a key focus for most CMOs, as opposed to just plain acquisition that was part of the past.
And I think all of those are great metrics to put in place. Yes, Atash, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just asking, I think it's very interesting when you said something about the KPIs. Anya, the question is that would you separate or divide between a CSAT and NPS as one metric vis-a-vis the NRR and CAC or lifetime value as a metric at two different levels? Well, are you seeing this as two, or it's a combined thing?
Okay, my view, Datesh, is CSAT is important to understand how your brand, whether your brand across all your customer touchpoints are really performing the way it should, from a satisfaction, from a customer experience standpoint. NPS in various heavy engineering, and it could be different for different industries, but in terms of heavy engineering industries, capex intensive industries, there's a lot of sales that happens just through word of mouth. That's pretty critical to see in the buying decision sometimes, and therefore calculating NPS is often important as a good metric to have. The revenue piece of it is really important for you to justify the kind of investments you're making overall. While LTV could be a slightly more longer run metric, you're looking over a 12-month cycle or maybe even 2 years. I think net revenue retention or net revenue attained could be a metric that's making sense to your CFO at the end of the year or to your CEO, etc., just to ensure your marketing investments are performing.
Well,
what do you think?
No, I think it's a great that we are aligned on that. But what I see is a slight deviation from what actually I see this, because I see the performance metrics as I define it, the net run rate, retention rate, or all those things, are on a short-term basis. This is my belief. Okay, I may be wrong too. Whereas CSAT as well as things is a more a long-term thing. So I differentiate these two categorize into two different things. One is as a long-term, because you need to continuously nurture the client to a certain extent where your NPS and CSAT is perfectly all right. Whereas here you need an immediate action point, because this is where the entire thing is. Now, when you see the full funnel is where CSAT and NPS work it, whereas your NRR, LTV, and all the CAC are mid funnel. So I see it that way.
Yeah.
And that's a good point there too, as far as the CSAT can also be shift over time. Their immediate satisfaction over something could change over a period of time. That lifetime value we've talked about, and the fact that maybe it's a consistent, repeated customer. They like your product, they like your brand. You've delivered consistency, and maybe it's clothing or a phone or something like that. But then over time, that degrades as far as their satisfaction. They liked it at first, but then wow, over time, the quality's becoming poorer and poorer, and maybe I want to shift to and look at another brand to see if they're better. And so that is a fine balance between that immediate, hey, we're getting all these great scores coming in, but then that's shifting over time. We need to look at the long term satisfaction. Yeah.
One of the surveys which I constantly do with my agencies was the opening question is very simple. The first question is, on scale of 1 to 10, will you recommend the agency to your peers or to somebody else? The first question on a 1 to 10 scale. So that's when it decides that metric. Like say I've given 9, then the rest of the question comes as justifying why 9. But the opening question is all think about what your the rest of the questions define. But the opening question is always, how would you recommend this specific brand, this specific agency to your other clients?
Yeah.
So that defines the everything else. So I think it's a fantastic way to get an approval from your existing ones.
Well, this conversation has been wonderful, and one thing that just stood out to me as we were closing up is the word practical. A lot of information that you both provided today has been practical. These are takeaways that many people and organizations could really think about or implement within their teams, and to start considering as well as how should we go about doing things, or what should we put in place. And so those are great internal questions that many of them should be asking themselves and within their teams and their organization. So I think this topic that we've covered many throughout our conversation today has been wonderful, and I want to thank you both for having this really in-depth conversation around these different themes. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you. And to everyone that watched this discussion, thank you. And be sure to follow QKS on LinkedIn or bookmark our website so that you don't miss many more of these important discussions and insightful discussions to come. So thank you.